Welcome to Thrive at Work, a podcast which offers insights and latest employment trends to help employers attract, retain and develop great people with me, Polly Rathbone Ward. With special guests, we're going to be discussing the many and varied aspects of HR, from practical topics to overarching cultural themes. We'll be looking beyond traditional styles of management to bring new and people-centred ideas to forward-thinking organisations that want to shape a new future where people can thrive at work.
Oh, let me click. Got it.
Hello and welcome to Thrive at Work. Today's discussion focuses on how employers can support employees experiencing difficulties around fertility. I'm really pleased to be talking today to Claire Ingle from Fertility Matters at Work, a business which exists to educate and inspire businesses with an awareness of how fertility issues affects both their employees and their organisation. So welcome, Claire. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here.
Thank you. Would you mind starting just talking through your background and how Fertility Matters came to be and how you come to do what you're doing with this brilliant business?
Of course I will. So independently, three of us have come together with a shared interest in this topic, but for my own personal background, I was working in the NHS as a HR manager when my husband and I discovered that we needed sort of scientific intervention to have a family or to have a baby. And we underwent 2 back-to-back fertility cycles, very, very close together, just shortly before my 40th. Before my 40th birthday. And then straight after that, we had to take a little bit of a break because it was just really stressful, and went into our 3rd and final cycle that was paid for this time because we weren't eligible for any more treatment on the NHS. And that was a success, I'm pleased to say, which was really brilliant. And I progressed through my pregnancy. I went on maternity leave. And then when I was about 5 months into being a mum, I looked back at my own experience and thought, what just happened there? That was really difficult. It was just really hard work because there was nothing there to support me. There was no policy, there was no guidance, there was no intervention that I could refer to that would tell me, like a scripted, look, this is what you can do. This is what you're entitled to. And equally, I had to educate my own line manager because she didn't know about treatment. She'd never dealt with it before. And we just the first 2 cycles, I didn't tell anybody. I think I need to make that clear. So we'll discuss that later about the whole keeping it a secret. But the 3rd cycle, I just was in a place where I needed her to know because I couldn't have dealt with it otherwise. And our treatment was in London at that point, and we lived in Manchester. I started talking about it. I wrote an article for the CIPD actually, the November of 2018. And then I started talking to other people in the fertility space, met Natalie, who's one of the co-founders of Fertility Matters at Work, went to the fertility show, spoke to her there. And then equally, Becky then got in touch with me, and then we kind of triangulated the conversation. I mean, the fertility space is very, the TTC or the trying to conceive community is actually quite big. I think it's been more prevalent in more recent years on social media. We started talking and we were all of the same opinion that, you know, something needed to change. These conversations weren't happening. They weren't in the workplace. It wasn't something that businesses actually even identified was an issue. And that's how Fertility Matters was born.
Wow, how interesting. So your background is HR, and you and your manager were both kind of finding your way through this at the same time together because it was new for her as well, I guess, and she wasn't quite sure how to respond or what to do.
Yes, yeah, it was. And interestingly, Becky and I always talk about this, but Becky's background is HR as well. And when we got together and started talking about this, we both agreed, or we both sort of said that in all our years as HR managers, both in private sector as well, and I've done public sector, currently work in public sector too, nobody came to us and said, I'm going through IVF treatment, what can you do to help me? And, you know, it affects so many people. And we were just absolutely gobsmacked that 35 years of experience between us both, that nobody had ever come to us as HR managers and said, I need help with this, or can you signpost me? Which then kind of indicates that people aren't talking about it, because there's no way in the world that there would be, that wouldn't have happened between both of us over 35 years. It's just not possible.
So when you say it affects so many people, can you give us some idea of numbers? I mean, what are we talking here?
Yeah. So latest statistics in the UK, so they do vary across the world. I think slightly different in the US, but in the UK, it's 1 in 6 to 7 people are affected by infertility. So 1 in 6, 7 people will have challenges conceiving, but this can take on different forms. I think I need to be clear around the fact that it could be primary infertility, so when you can't conceive your first child, or people can have a first child and then unable to conceive the second child, which is secondary infertility. And then we have different sort of labels of infertility now. So social infertility is another one, in that people who are on their own, they're not in a relationship, they don't have a partner to biologically conceive a child. There's a lot more people going down the solo parenthood route, both male and female. And then you have single sex couples that obviously need scientific intervention to conceive, because biologically not able to with one another. So, you know, there's all different people from different walks of life that need that intervention, and it's just becoming more and more prevalent as time goes on.
And so the 1 in 6 or 7 that you mentioned, does that encompass all of those different sorts of infertility?
So in 1991, the HFEA, which is the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority, was created, and this is like the auditor, if you like, of all clinics in the UK. So since time began with them, the number of cycles has increased tenfold since 1991. So obviously the demand of that's getting bigger. And obviously science has improved. And I know, you know, the first IVF baby was late 70s, same year I was born. But, you know, there was 2 last reported trends in 2019. There was almost 53,000 patients that went through IVF treatment. But equally, when we have discussions with people, this is not an accurate reflective figure of the UK, because a lot of people go abroad because it's cheaper abroad to undergo that treatment. You know, and there's different avenues that people explore. So those numbers aren't in that 53,000, but it is increasing, it is going up. And there's other elements that feed into that, Polly, as well. So people are waiting longer to have children. They, you know, because the economy, because of job, because of career development and all that sort of stuff, that is actually, people want to get a house and get on the housing ladder, but then we're hearing that a lot of people are in their 30s before that happens now. So then people push having a family or starting a family back. And we know that biologically, the older you get, the harder it is to conceive, traditionally. Obviously, that's not applicable for everybody, but, you know, in the main, that is the rule that we work with.
Okay, thank you. And so this is a very broad question, but what impact might this have then on work and a person's ability to carry out their day-to-day work?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I mean, speaking from my own experience, I think what people don't factor in to having IVF treatment is the psychological impact it has on you as an individual. We've done surveys with Fertility Matters at work where people have reported having high anxiety, even depression, and even people with reporting suicidal feelings because of the pressures this causes. So I know personally people who've had relationship breakdowns, marriage breakdowns because of the pressure it puts on. There's an added financial pressure as well, in that people more often than not have to actually pay for treatment. I think we paid around £15,000 for our 3rd cycle. That is not money that we just have lying around. And my husband and I, luckily, both in good jobs. But it's a pressure that you don't need. And quite often in the workplace, what happens is people are told to take unpaid time off. So by doing that, you're putting that extra pressure on somebody that needs to pay for treatment and then reducing their monthly income. So it's like a double-edged sword. And the other thing is that, you know, or they have to take it during annual leave. So when you're stressed and you need a break from work, you're using annual leave to actually go through treatment. Again, double-edged sword. There's a lot of pressure on people to just cope, really. But it's hard work. I mean, not only that, the physical aspects of it. So the injecting of the hormones, they affect your sleep, they affect your concentration, they affect how you feel. You are sore from injecting your stomach all the time, constantly. I had bruising all across my stomach, which made even silly things like wearing your work clothes. You couldn't wear things that were tight around your waist because it caused a lot of discomfort, bloating from the effects of the injections. You know, you have to go for egg collection, you have to go under sedations. Having sedation regularly, it isn't good for your body. But yeah, for me, I think the work, I just struggled with the whole work bit because I'm such a perfectionist at work, and I wanted to remain that credible HR person in the business and do my job. And it was just too much. It was too overwhelming. And after the second cycle that I had, I went off sick for about 5 or 6 weeks because I just couldn't cope, and it was just too much. And I just needed some downtime, and I needed some time out of work. Just too much going on.
Did you say that was after your second cycle?
Yes, after second cycle, and then I had the break, and then we started again.
Is that when you found out that hadn't been successful?
Yes, so that was 2 negative tests. I think, you know, some of your listeners might be aware of this on social media already, but there's a lot of social media hype at the minute about taking COVID tests and having the negative, positive lines in there. And it's something that, even though my experience was several years ago, it's very much fresh in my mind. And actually, I think anybody who's listening to this that has been through IVF treatment, this isn't you get pregnant and you have a successful live birth and then it's over. You know, those feelings continue to evolve, and they continue to be part of you as an individual, and they don't just stop. And you do reflect back on it and think, you know, what would I have done differently? And, you know, I'm one of the lucky ones, because IVF doesn't work for everybody, and some people go through it 6, 7, 8 times, and God knows how they actually cope with that. But we'd made an agreement, my husband and I, to just, the third time was it. That was it, because I just couldn't psychologically cope any longer with it, and I couldn't have had another negative test. I think it would have just been too soul destroying for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is an emotional and stressful and traumatic experience to go through, isn't it? And to be attempting to carry out your job as well.
Yes, it is. I mean, I think the other thing is that, you know, we have the complexity of miscarriage pushed into this as well. So you know, getting pregnant, people who have fertility problems battle to get pregnant. They still could be one of the 25% who then experience pregnancy loss at any point. You know, it's not just getting pregnant is the first hurdle that you do a tick, but then you have an anxiety. Past that, are you going to carry full term? Is there something going to happen? Is it going to be taken away from you and you have to go back to the beginning? The complexity of the emotions in there is something quite extraordinary, I think.
I'm sure. Okay, so tell me more about Fertility Matters at Work and what services you actually offer to clients.
Oh, wow. So this is totally just incredible what we've done in the last couple of months, even though I say so myself. I mean, we fundamentally want to make a massive difference and become a voice to this. So organisations have kind of nailed menopause down a little bit tighter than they had a few years ago. And, you know, there's a lot of momentum around that, which is safely in the women's health space. But we're not seeing conversations about fertility. There are some organisations that actually have picked this up and thought, yeah, there's definitely a gap here. But in terms of what we do, primarily we're there to educate and empower organisations to just get them to understand the challenges that their employees face. We run lunch and learns. We have this amazing e-learning that we pull together, and it's the first of its kind in the UK, which we're exceptionally proud of. And we've worked alongside a great e-learning provider to get this together, and it's basically to inform organisations as to the challenges of fertility treatment, you know, conversations that go on in the workplace. We have shared clips of people that have had to have IVF treatment to have their children. So single-sex couples is one of the groups of people that we look at. We also have this amazing membership site, which we have just launched recently. And in that, you get access to a lot of resources. We're running monthly webinars with education. The first one's on the 23rd of February, and that's a guide to becoming fertility friendly. And then we have them every month from then on in. But we do have free resources on our website as well, because primarily for us, we want people to recognise there's a need for this. And actually, the other thing that I always say is people don't know what they don't know. So, you know, if you don't, you know, and if people traditionally do not talk about this. They don't come into the office and go, oh, I'm trying for a baby. People don't do that under normal circumstances. In the main, I'm not saying it always happens, but in the main, people don't come in and talk about it. But, you know, equally, if you're having that trouble to conceive, that's not something you go sit across a canteen table and have a conversation with your colleagues about. It's you know, there's a lot of emotions, again, complex emotions like shame, guilt for not being, you know, your body letting you down, or something else letting you down, or the fact you're not in a relationship and you haven't met the right person. There's all these things that play into it. And actually, I think businesses are oblivious to this going on, yet from our social media accounts, especially on Instagram, there's a huge rumbling around this, around people saying, yes, that's happened to me and my organisation didn't know and I didn't tell them. And, you know, I don't think if I'd have told them, I'd have got the support I needed. And some of these are anecdotal comments, so the people actually haven't asked, but we do get a lot of people saying that they did disclose it and they were put aside for projects or work, or sideways moved, which means that their career is being affected before they've even had a family. And also it's that the career progression path. So when you're on a good career trajectory, if you suddenly kind of pause it and say, well, I'm having a child, people will look at you differently. That does happen. In the main, for the majority of people, you know, they'll just, if someone has a 5-year succession plan and you're part of it, and then all of a sudden you say, well, I want time out to have a child, that's going to interrupt that business's plan. So, you know, I think, and I don't think, I'd like to think organizations don't consciously do this, but I think some of the messages we get via Instagram especially sort of contradict what I believe.
Yeah, I was going to mention that actually, that many seem to fear telling their employer about the need to go through fertility treatment and that they're potentially trying for a baby. So yeah, I was going to ask you to expand on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they do. I mean, we just get a lot of people, mainly women, who contact us and say, you know, they've left their jobs, they've set up their own organizations or their own businesses, because they can't be in that space anymore. And you know, there are a lot of people that contact us that are really high flying executives. You know, we're not talking, you know, we're talking a wide range of people. We have teachers, engineers, doctors, nurses. You know, there's a lot of people that work in different environments that have different challenges. But equally, I think it's only fair to give a nod to the really good organisations out there at this point as well. There are some that have got this absolutely right and they get it, and they're getting it, and they're starting to have conversations saying, what can we do more to support? I mean, we've had some really good conversations with some organizations that I can't kind of mention at this point in time, but you know, there are people that are knocking on our door saying, you know, tell me more, what can we do? And you know, we are being approached by people who say, I get it, or even people in those roles that have had their own challenges with fertility, and they're just thinking, yeah, that happened to me. I mean, I describe it as a ripple effect. So every time myself, Becky, or Natalie meet new people and we start this conversation, people start saying, oh, that's happened to me too, or I know someone that's happened to, or that happened to a friend of mine in work. And it's almost like this, it's an amazing feeling. It sounds a bit bizarre, but it's almost like this little bit of fire inside you that makes you feel, wow, do you know what, this is definitely needed, and that's what keeps us going, because we know that there's a demand for it out there.
Well, I guess you're raising awareness, aren't you?
Yes.
Enabling that conversation to happen, which perhaps has been very, very difficult in the past for some people to have. So
yes.
Just going back to the services you offer, you were talking about the e-learning platform and things. What has the response been from organisations? I mean, you've just alluded to a couple that are obviously very impressed and excited by it, but in more general terms, what's the sort of response been from organisations?
So, you know, we held a webinar last November, I think, which is the one that you potentially were on, I think. Yes. And
yeah,
I think we had over 100 people attend that, which was absolutely amazing. And, you know, when we started sort of putting the word out there that we were going to do it, and, you know, so many people have actually emailed or just sent us messages on Instagram to say, thank you so much for just making this a conversation, just making it happen. It is a bit I do find it a bit bonkers that IVF treatment's been around for 40 odd years and we're still and we're only just having the conversation about it. It's almost as if, I guess it's an embodiment of all women's health from a very young age, you know. So we talk about puberty and then periods and then, you know, kind of conceiving and then the menopause. So we've got this entire cycle of a female's life. And to be fair, not to be fair, absolutely categorically, everybody trying to conceive is of working age. You know, they're not going to be 14 and they're not going to be 65. So everybody in this workspace is of an age that they want to, that they potentially can have a child biologically. But yeah, sorry, back to your original question, Polly. The people have contacted us. They have asked to find out more. There's been a natural curiosity. I think that's the word I want to use to describe how this has landed. There's been a curiosity that people are saying, oh, what's this? And, you know, when you start talking to people about, you know, what you're doing about menopause, and everyone's like, yeah, we're on that. And I'm like, okay, what about the 75% of your workforce that this doesn't affect? You know, this is really important to then capture this. And it's almost, for a lot of people, it's great because, I mean, what we don't want to do is shove this down people's throats. This is purely something that we want people to come to us and ask about. We want to be able to, like I said before, empower people to have that conversation and they need to realize there's a need for it. We're not that type of organization that we start ramming it down people's throats and saying, you must do this, you must do that. And actually, one of the main things with us is we just want to make a difference. We want to empower the employee and the employer to make those changes in their culture that will support their business and their entire workforce plan, because this is only going to get a bigger challenge as time goes on. This fertility levels are going to decline. That's not scientific. I'm not basing it, and they are declining, but, you know, it's we talk about environment and all the other affecting factors of people waiting to have children, the economic element and everything. So I think it's just going to be a bigger challenge, and the United States are actually ahead of us in that they're offering egg freezing as a perk of employment. And I'd watch this space, it will come here. Absolutely, I'll place money on it. I would absolutely place money. It'll start creeping into the UK in the next 10 years, definitely.
How interesting. Gosh. Okay, great. So what have you seen as a result of the pandemic in this area?
Oh, wow. So pandemic. So while everybody else was kind of going, this pandemic is awful. It's which it absolutely is and was awful. We ran a survey in the height of it on Instagram, and we asked, has the pandemic made it harder or easier for you to have treatment? So this was obviously after treatment was paused and unpaused because the clinic shut down for a period of time and nobody could access it. But we had a staggering 83% of people that we surveyed said, absolutely, it's made it easier. So it made it easier for me to attend appointments because I don't have to explain my absence. So I think, you know, the fact that people were and still are working remotely, they don't have to, you know, their physical presence isn't seen as much, so they could actually manipulate their diaries around appointments and things, which is, again, a little bit crazy, isn't it? Because actually, how does a pandemic make something easier? And that was a staggering statistic for us. And we just thought, flipping it, this is just terrible. But, you know, the words that I mentioned before, the stigma bit, the shame, the, you know, where are you going? Why are you on a longer lunch? And that still does happen in organizations. We can't say it doesn't. But if you're physically at a desk and you have to leave, I mean, I was physically at a desk that I had to leave to go for my appointments. People could see I wasn't there and people would ask questions where I was. But working remotely, you know, that didn't happen.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Gosh, wow.
It's interesting and crazy at the same time.
Goodness, great. Thank you for that. So I was reading on your website actually about your campaign to work with 100 companies. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so the 100 is an initial target. So we're going to think big here. We're going to dream big. So we know these conversations have been gaining momentum over the last few months, and they're definitely out there. And we're campaigning to get companies to become fertility friendly and to get a fertility friendly accreditation through a series of assessments, workshops, educational talks, and access to our membership site, which I've already mentioned. We're just currently getting the CPD to accredit our e-learning training, so that forms part of the accreditation. And again, it is just fundamentally about that education element and getting organisations to just sit up and go, oh yeah, yes, that's definitely something we could do with. You know, this isn't a ticket. I think it's really important. It's very important for all three of us. This isn't a tick in the box trendy thing to do. This is about being a huge lever of change here and making a difference, because you can't just do something like this, give it a nod and then walk away. This is around those evolving conversations, making sure people feel empowered to put their hand up and come forward and say, I'm having treatment, what can you do to support? But equally, again, this is not on a big power trip for, oh, you know, everything for the employee. Absolutely, we want those conversations to start, but we don't want businesses to suffer either. We need them to see the benefit of having people be honest with them and then be able to work around that person's appointments flexibly, you know, some give and take, some diary support, maybe some support from other people within the team. You know, there's a whole host of things they can do, but it is about culture. And you know what? The pandemic has highlighted, if nothing else, the importance of well-being. And I know that's really something on your agenda, isn't it? But you know, this is part of that well-being agenda going forward. It definitely is. And actually, if the pandemic's taught us anything, that we can be flexible and we can work out of those 9 to 5 hours. So yeah, that's our 100 companies starting at 100 companies.
So you mentioned there about the benefits of, you know, encouraging people to be honest about what's going on for them. Tell me more about what other benefits there are to actually being, you know, proactive and supporting people potentially going through fertility treatment for the employer.
So you know, we talk recruitment is the hardest it's been in the last couple of years. So we all know we have massive recruitment challenges now, and actually having that edge of that family friendly angle, I think, helps with attraction to organisations, especially in the UK. While people are employed, it's having people that work in your business that are that feel valued and they feel that they can be truthful with you, and also having that psychological safety, we describe it as, that people feel that they can come forward and say, I'm struggling with this. And then obviously that relates to a higher retention rate. So I know people that are fertility advocates in their organisations, and their organisations champion that, and they're absolutely loyal. They'll go above and beyond for their employer. They will do what it takes in their day-to-day work because they feel valued and they feel that they've been given an opportunity to make a difference.
So you talked about, women actually leaving their roles because of, I guess the stress and the situation that they're in and not feeling supported. And we know that there are stages in a woman's life where they're more likely to drop out of the workplace, whether that's just after you've had a baby or the menopause, or, and this all, of course, pays into the gender pay gap, doesn't it, as well? So I guess this is yet another stage where, we do need to look after our, women in the workplace, because we need to keep them in work. Otherwise, they're going to be penalised. This is my understanding anyway, in a number of ways. They're not going to be gaining the pension contributions, the pay rises, the potential promotions. They're going to be potentially losing out on that. Is that something that you would agree with?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I was reading in People Management magazine that we've only just, as the UK, we've only just made this in the last year that females hold in the majority of non-exec roles, and the government have announced new targets for the next 5 years for women in board positions. But, the very fact we know that women biologically have to have the child, there's nothing we can kind of do about that yet. And generally people will want to take time off and spend time with their baby or their child. This isn't America, where we are not afforded with maternity rights. As the UK has really great maternity rights, but actually the things I alluded to before, so there are people that are losing confidence from their employer because they're trying to conceive and then they're sidelined for things, or they are put back in terms of career succession planning. I mean, I've read recently on LinkedIn some really great stories whereby women were given exec roles when they're 7 months pregnant. But do you know what? They're few and far between. You look at those, you go, oh my God, that's amazing. And actually, this should be our everyday life conversation. But we still have challenges around pregnancy. So if you just go back a step, we've got that challenge now that, like I said before, if you have to tell your employer that you're trying to conceive, they are going to make, whether they're conscious or unconscious decisions about your position in the organization, dependent on where you sit. They will, potentially make arrangements around, the succession plan that they have for you. They might think, oh, that's going to be a gap that I need to fill. It just becomes really complicated, doesn't it? Because actually, I'd have loved it if my husband could have had our daughter, because then he's often said I would have taken the time off, and it's just the physical element of it as well. It's very, it's trying to have a baby and go through a pregnancy, especially if you're older. But yeah, this doesn't help the situation. And what I've just said about People Management magazine and women in non-executive roles, it's 2022. We're just making that happen. And actually, we've got such a far journey to still go on. And actually, I think if organizations get on board with these conversations, it's almost giving permission to people, and it's not just a woman's issue, this, I think I need to say that, but actually it does affect women more so in the workplace than men. It's disproportionate to women. But we need to normalize it, and we need to almost give people permission to say, you can come forward, you can say you're trying to conceive, and we won't penalize you for that. Equally, when you're pregnant, we won't penalize you for that and think you're going to have a gap and then you can't get promoted. And then when you come back and you're a parent and you have childcare, we won't penalize you for that. So there's a whole kind of host of parental challenges there, I think. But I definitely think the conversations are happening. It's very slow, but it's almost like this little smouldering light that's starting. I'd love to come back in 10 years' time and have this conversation with you again. There you go.
Let's do
Note it down.
Okay, cool. So if there are employers out there thinking, goodness, I think I need to do something about this, what would be your sort of practical tips of, because it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to talk about. It's a hard thing for organizations to even start, having this conversation. What would be your sort of practical tips?
Okay, so first and foremost, this is, organisations need to understand this happens. Okay, this happens. So I think actually acknowledging that this happens and it's happening to your workforce is a really good starting point. If people remain naive or ignorant to the fact this happens, then I think they've got a long way to go, to be perfectly honest. But for the majority of people, this is a very sensitive topic. It needs to be handled in a sensitive way. But if people don't feel they can discuss this in a psychologically safe environment, they're more likely to lie about their treatment, and this will cause no end of problems to organisations, as I've already discussed. People will lie, they'll take time off sick, they will cost your business money. But I think just dipping your toe in the water if you're an organisation and just asking the question, do you know what? Look, put the question out there. Do people think this is happening, and would it benefit you as employees to actually that we did something about it? Because people vote, don't they? So we see a lot of organisations with a lot of focus group and peer-to-peer support groups. We've had them for a long time. We have different groups. We have single sex groups, we have groups that discuss the menopause, but fertility seems to be that unforgotten entity. So I guess ask the question if you're an organization, and just test the water, dip your toe in. And if you've got people coming forward saying, yeah, this is me, it's happened to me, and this might be employees that have been there 20 years, it's happened, they've been through it in the past, and they're only feeling confident now to be able to come forward and say, yeah, it did happen to me. And then from there, you've got those conversations can start in a really safe place where people go, okay, we recognize this happens, what can we do? This isn't about an organization going, I've got all the answers, I know what it's about. It's about it, using the people that have been through it. Lived experience is a massive thing for us. So with us at Fertility Matters at Work, all three of us have been through this, so we know what it's like. We're not claiming to know, we know what it's like, we've all done it. And do you know what? Harness that knowledge and that power in those people to be able to have those conversations from a wider perspective, and actually go out there and start saying, what is it you want? And do you know what? Your employees will tell you. They'll start saying, well, actually, when it happened to me, I felt we didn't have any guidance, or we didn't have any policy, or our IVF treatment line was in the maternity policy, which is insensitively placed. Can you please move it? And all these things start to unravel, because I've seen it happen. Becky's seen it happen, Natalie's seen it happen, in that, people start going, oh, right. And it is almost like you can see this light bulb moment above people's heads going, okay, that makes sense. So this isn't about a magic toolbox that people, or a toolkit that people are going to go, that's it. I mean, we're here to support with that and those conversations because of our lived experience and our wide range of people that we partner with and the work we do. But do you know what? It's down to the organisations themselves to actually just open the door and just say, right, do we need to do something about this? I think that's the absolute key starting point.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I was going to ask you about sort of exemplar organisations that are doing things really well, and I just remember that Channel 4 hit the news, I think, last year with their pregnancy loss policy, which I think was one of the first organisations to launch such a thing.
Yes.
I just wondered if you could recommend, just in case anyone's thinking of, it'd be useful to research, if you could give any other organisations that are doing things really well.
Oh wow, I could with the ones that obviously I've seen on. I mean, the I think it's Stonegate Pub. They did an article on LinkedIn about, I think it's about 7 months ago, and they've done a pregnancy loss policy as well. So I think they're leading the way on sort of women's health and the difficult conversations, because pregnancy loss is a really tough one to kind of challenge. But yeah, you've already mentioned Channel 4. Do you know what, Polly, it's really hard, isn't it, because people aren't in that space at the minute. And again, fast forward us 5 years, I would love to be sat here, and I will be sat here, because I know that people pick this up and run with it. And actually there are organisations, I mean, we've had organisations sign up to our membership. I don't know if I can say who they are. This is what I'm getting really anxious about. But you know, there's people that are starting to do things. I mean, lots of people are in that menopause space already, and there are companies starting to do that. But I think that's our lever to get in, because once you've got the kind of end bit of women's health, then you've got that previous bit which people will naturally follow. Should probably go in order really, but you know, backwards I'm fine with. If we do it backwards, it doesn't make any difference, as long as the conversation.
Menopause has been so popular,
yeah,
really, you know, taken it's really risen up, hasn't it? And a lot of people are taking account of that. It's really interesting,
especially in the HR space. I mean, it's massive in the HR space at the minute. We, you know, it's just huge. I think in People Management magazine, they said that, again, another article said 1 million women due to leave due to issues with menopause in the workplace. And do you know what? 1 million women, that's massive. It's absolutely massive, isn't it? You just think, well, I wonder how many, if we could do an actual survey on how many people that affected with fertility. It'd be really interesting. I don't quite know how we manage that. To be fair.
Okay, great, thank you. Super. We have come to the end of our time, I think, but if people would like to find out more, how do they get in touch with you and Becky and Natalie?
So we have a website. It's www.fertilitymattersatwork.com. You can follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn at Fertility Matters at Work. So we post on all those portals regularly. There are free resources on our webpage, so I do urge people to have a look there, just to dip the toe in the water to see what we offer.
Brilliant, thank you. And are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Oh, just, I guess for me, it's really important for me, because this is something that myself, Becky and Natalie are really, really passionate about. We want to make that difference, and we want those conversations to happen. And do you know what? How they happen and is brilliant. Is up to organisations, and they can do what they can to make sure people have them. But just listen to your employees, and actually, just like I said a minute ago, just ask the question, because this isn't a three women just standing here trying to make a load of noise about something that isn't reality. This is a very real challenge for a lot of people in employment, and actually just go out there and ask the question. For me, it's just really important to take that first step.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really interesting conversation, so thank you very much.
Thank you.